He wiped the blood-colored smudge of someone's shoe off the glass. The building behind the glass hummed like a cold heart beating too fast. People streamed past him, clicking heels, murmuring screens, a cough echoing down the marble hall. They didn't see him, but he saw everything. He noticed the pause in the hum, the wrong blink of a blue light in the server hallway, and when the whole thing fell apart, it wasn't the system that saw first. It was him. The janitor, the man no one knew. But he had a daughter, and her voice would stop the world. The coffee hit the floor with a slap, splattered across the white tiles like rust. The young man in a tight suit, headphones in, jaw tense, glanced down, muttered something without stopping, and kept walking. The door swung closed behind him. George knelt without a sound. The rag in his hand moved with slow precision, practiced like breath. He could still feel the heat of the spill, could still smell the vanilla-flavored caffeine. No need to sigh. He just pressed his palm once to the floor, wiped in a circle, and straightened up, knees crackling under his weight. Behind him, the elevator dinged. 3 men in polished shoes stepped out mid-conversation, their voices sharp and clipped. "Just burn the QA backlog, I don't care, get it shipped." They passed him, one adjusting his cufflinks. Another glanced his way, then through him, as if George were a coat rack. He moved on to the next smudge. Down the hall, the vending machine blinked its usual lie. "Out of order," in red letters. The corner of it was slightly bent from when someone had kicked it last week. George crouched beside it, opened the back panel without asking permission. His fingers moved over wires, metal teeth, the logic of old circuits. He didn't need to see to know what wasn't connecting. He heard it in the hum. Click. The light changed. The machine coughed and whirred awake. Chocolate bars dropped into place like soldiers snapping to attention. A hand reached past him and grabbed one. A gray-suited man with a laminated badge reading CTO walked off, chewing, not even pausing to glance down. George stood there a second longer, then reached into his shirt pocket, took out a small black notebook with frayed edges. He thumbed past pages of scribbles, tape, a single 4-leaf clover pressed between receipts. He wrote, "Kindness costs nothing. That's why it's worth everything." Then, just for a moment, he smiled. At reception, Emma was struggling with 2 overstuffed archive boxes, paper edges flapping. She shifted one to her knee, muttered, "Seriously, where is everyone?" George stepped forward, lifting both boxes wordlessly. She blinked. "Oh, thanks," she said, already turning toward the records room. Her tone was polite. Her eyes didn't meet his. He carried the boxes past framed stock photos of smiling teams, past glass walls that held nothing but empty chairs and flickering screensavers, set them down gently by her desk. "You're always around," she said vaguely, flipping through a calendar. George nodded. He didn't correct her. The elevator doors opened. A group of top-level managers stepped in. George followed, tucking his mop into the corner. The tallest one, tan with 2 white teeth, turned to the others with a half smile. "Did someone give janitorial access to executive lifts now?" he said, as if making a joke. George didn't flinch, just pressed the button for the lobby and stared ahead. His left hand drifted down, brushing the spine of his notebook in his pocket, noted something invisible. He stepped out without a word. That afternoon, he returned with a small paper bag. Inside, 3 apple hand pies, still warm. He'd baked them early that morning, before work, for the birthday of a woman who'd once complimented his shoes. He left them on the breakroom counter, a napkin under them. No note. By 4 o'clock, they were still there. Someone had left a box of donuts beside them, branded with a delivery logo and signed with a manager's initials. Everyone reached for the donuts. George didn't take the bag back. He just sat near the exit, sipping lukewarm water, watching as the pies went untouched. "Dad." A small voice bounced against the marble. Maya stood in the lobby, her oversized backpack slipping off one shoulder. She grinned and skipped over, tablet in hand, eyes scanning the ceiling like it was a storybook. He smiled, brushing her bangs from her forehead. "Homework?" "Almost. But I drew Mr. Gavin today." He frowned slightly. "Which one's Gavin?" "The one with the wrinkly forehead and too many pens." He chuckled. "Ah, the head of security." She glanced around. "Why do you always say hi to people who don't say hi back?" He didn't answer at first, just adjusted the strap on her backpack, then said quietly, "Because I see them." In the far wing, a faint noise drifted out, a mechanical rhythm, broken mid-beat. He heard it before it happened, the server hallway. George turned, eyes narrowing. The flickering light above the door had a hiccup, a hum that skipped. He walked to the guard desk. "I think one of the cooling fans in the south server rack's going. Might be power." His voice was soft, measured. The younger guard didn't even look up from his phone. "You're not IT. Go clean the break room." George stood still, for a beat too long, then nodded once. In the waiting area, Maya sat cross-legged on the couch, drawing quietly. Her finger swiped across the screen, shaping color into faces. She didn't look up as a tall executive strode past, pausing just long enough to catch sight of a sketch that looked too much like him. Not the face he put on for meetings, the one he had when he was alone. He stopped, said nothing, then kept walking. Evening came, and the office thinned. Emma leaned against the wall near the fire stairs, lighting a cigarette with a slow flick. She didn't look surprised to find George sitting there, back to the wall, eyes half closed. "You're the only one who hasn't left a single day I've been here," she said suddenly. "Same time, same place." George smiled with one corner of his mouth. Bad habit. She looked at the glowing end of her cigarette. Or maybe that's just what keeping a place running looks like. He didn't respond. Smoke curled up between them, soft and silent. In the parking lot, Maya looked up at the dark windows and said, "You ever feel like the lights are watching you too?" George looked, long and quiet, then said, "Sometimes, but mostly, they're waiting for someone to notice they've gone out." The door shut behind them. Inside, the machine still hummed. The fans still clicked wrong. The pies were still there, cold now. But something was listening, and something had begun. The screens froze at 11:42 a.m. Not all at once. First, a flicker, like a skipped frame in a movie. Then the spinning cursors. Then the silence. Not real silence, but the kind made of rising breath, chairs scraping, footsteps stopping mid-stride. The hum of the building dimmed. Monitors blinked. Then nothing moved. From the 20th floor to the basement, it was like someone had turned the pulse off. "Is this some kind of update?" someone asked, voice too high. "No one scheduled anything." "The interfaces are locked. I can't even log out." "Are you serious right now?" In the executive wing, glass doors opened too fast. People poured out like smoke from a broken vent. Phones rang, voices collided. A printer near the accounting office stuttered once and gave up. The CEO's voice cracked the air like a thrown chair. "Where the hell is IT?" No one answered. The hallway was bodies in motion, but no direction. Some shouted. Some pointed at screens. Others stared at their devices as if staring harder would make something work. In the janitor's closet, George stood motionless, one hand on a mop handle, listening. A low whir, distant and uneven, reached him through the pipes. The same sound, the same breathless pause in the system he'd noticed days ago. He stepped out, quiet, slow. Near the help desk, a group of IT staff huddled, fingers flying over keyboards that didn't respond. A young engineer, pale with stress, muttered, "None of the nodes are pinging. It's like the rack's dead." George walked toward them. "You should check the back intake line in the south server bay," he said quietly. "I heard the fans straining. Might be a thermal overload. Power routing could be collapsing from—" A man in a branded hoodie cut him off without looking up. "Not now." George stood still, then repeated, soft, calm, unshaken. "The fan's been choking for 3 days. You can lose a breaker cascade if—" "Sir." The same man stood, chest puffed like a bouncer. "Go. This isn't not like I'll go with him." George didn't say, "Thank you." He just turned and walked, Anil falling into step beside him. The hallway to the server room felt colder than usual. The closer they got, the heavier the air felt. A deep, mechanical groan echoed through the floor tiles like a warning. George reached for the panel key he'd never been given. He'd made one years ago, after a fire drill that jammed the system for 6 hours. They stepped into the room. Lights blinked red. A tang of burnt plastic was in the air. George's hands moved with slow precision. No panic. No wasted motion. He dropped to one knee, pried open a lower casing, found the bypass fuse he knew would be warped. He nodded once, then unplugged the central inverter and rerouted power from the emergency line, balancing the load manually while Anil watched. "You used to do this," Anil whispered. George didn't look up, but his hands paused. Just for a second. "I did, once." Outside, Maya sat alone in the wide lobby, surrounded by grown-ups unraveling. Some paced. Some shouted into silent phones. Some just stared. She climbed onto the small platform where holiday speeches were given and touched the mic. No sound. But the power emergency line still had a thread of current. The backup mic lit a pale red. She took a breath and sang. A quiet, trembling melody. A lullaby her father used to hum when he didn't think she was listening. The note in the basement, a soft click echoed through the server room. Then another. The lights shifted from red to yellow. Then one turned green. Anil looked at the monitor. "One node's back." George didn't smile. Just George walked back into the main hallway, silent as ever. Maya ran to his side and took his hand. He gave it a gentle squeeze. The laughter started 2 hours later. "You hear the janitor thinks he's some kind of tech whisperer? Hey, maybe I should mop something and wait for enlightenment." George was called to security. They didn't say why, just sat him in the gray office with bad lighting and a crooked clock. "You were seen inside the server bay without authorization." He nodded once. "You understand that's a violation of—" Anil appeared in the doorway. "He saved the rack," he said flatly. The guard blinked. "Excuse me?" If he hadn't rerouted the backup, the array would have burned. I checked the logs. We were 5 minutes away from a full collapse. The room fell quiet. George looked at the floor. The scuff mark under his chair. The smell of cheap vinyl. "I'm writing the report," Anil added. He's going on record. With me. Later that afternoon, the company held an all-hands. Not for celebration, more damage control. The CEO stood under a screen full of graphs. And we're still assessing total downtime. However, the swift response of our technical team ensured that a hand went up. Will George be speaking? Silence. Then rustling. The CEO cleared his throat. Mr. Harrison, if you'd like to say a few words. George stepped up to the mic, looked at the crowd, at Emma, arms crossed but watching, at the executives, shifting in their seats. He didn't speak right away. He took out his notebook, looked at it, then said, quiet, even, I didn't fix anything special. I just listened. He paused. Machines talk when they break. So do people. So do places. You just have to listen. He closed the notebook, nodded once. Nobody clapped. Nobody moved. But their faces weren't the same as they'd been that morning. Maya stood in the back, her hand on her tablet, sketching again. A curve of her father's shoulder. The way his fingers held the notebook, like it mattered more than the building. She smiled, and somewhere in the pipes above, the air began to move differently. The CEO stood by the window with both hands deep in his pockets, jacket unbuttoned, breathing through his nose like he was trying not to yell. Behind him, the city blinked. Sunlight bouncing off glass towers, traffic moving like veins through steel. George stood across the room, mop cart nowhere in sight. You saved us millions, the CEO said finally. You want money? Promotion? Hell, name a wing after you. George's voice was level. I want one thing. The CEO turned. My daughter. She comes in after school sometimes. Last week someone called her the little cleaner's girl. George looked the man in the eye. I don't want that to happen again. To her. Or anyone. The CEO didn't respond, but something in his face shifted. A notch looser, a little more human. By lunch, the whispers began. He's just the janitor. This was a fluke. Aren't they saying it was really Anil who fixed it? Emma passed by a table where two women sat with their heads close, sipping from branded thermoses. You signing that letter? One asked. The one suggesting background checks on all auxiliary staff. Emma stopped, turned, set her coffee down with a quiet, deliberate clink. No. She didn't say anything else, just walked away. In the server bay, the IT director paused beside a folding chair where George had once sat during breaks. A half-eaten apple still rested on the windowsill. The director looked at it, then reached into his pocket, placed a folded note on the chair. It read, I used to be invisible too. I'm sorry. George found it later. Didn't react. Just folded it again and slipped it between the pages of his notebook. The next day, the CEO stopped George in the hallway, offered him a position, official, permanent, on the Internal Systems Advisory Team. A real title, a desk, a badge with a photo. George looked at the offer, weighed the silence. I belong where I hear things first, he said. That's not in a meeting room. The CEO blinked, then gave a slow, reluctant nod. Your call. That afternoon, George walked the same halls he always had. Same bucket, same floor polish. But now... Morning, George. A nod from a junior manager. Hey, thanks again, said someone from finance. The guard at the front desk stood when George entered, gave him a quiet salute. He didn't answer much, just smiled, like someone noticing a breeze after a long time underground. Out in the lobby, Maya was up on a ladder, hair tied back with a paint-smeared ribbon, sketching outlines in bold strokes across the main wall. A company commission. She worked in silence, earbuds in, brushes hanging from her belt. The mural was massive, colors bleeding together in slow, warm motion. At the center, not too large but unmistakable, stood George, mop in hand. Surrounding him, people, talking, reaching, listening. He hadn't seen it yet. Employees passed by and slowed, some stopping to stare. One woman touched her chest and whispered, "That's him." The office began to shift. People picked up paper off the floor that wasn't theirs. Doors were held open longer. Someone brought coffee to security. Emma baked something. The vending machine stayed stocked. Someone had learned how to fix it. George's notebook, once always in his shirt pocket, was now in a glass case at the entrance. It sat under soft lights beside a simple plaque. He heard us, because he didn't speak over us. One morning, a new intern spilled a whole cup of tea in the kitchen. He scrambled for napkins, apologizing, panicked. George knelt beside him without a word, helped mop up the mess. The kid stopped, confused. "You're him," he said. "Right?" George just winked. "Today I'm just on spill duty." The intern laughed, nervous but grateful. That evening, George passed through the same lobby where he once walked unseen. Now, people looked up. They nodded. One man reached out and offered him a cup of hot coffee. Black, no sugar. "For the guy who notices everything," he said. George took it with both hands. Outside, the sky was shifting to dusk. Maya walked alone through the hallway, her backpack bouncing gently against her shoulders. She passed the mural, paused to glance at it, then continued. At the end of the hall, a new sign gleamed on the frosted glass door of a small room that used to be storage. Center for Practical Wisdom, founded by George H. She stopped, smiled, and kept walking, like she already knew what came next. Behind her, the building breathed different now. Lighter, warmer. He never demanded change. He just didn't leave.